Understanding why we chose CaribSea rock and sand for our HelloReef system might not matter that much to you. It works well, it looks nice, and it will lead to success. But as a teacher, I just can't pass up a teachable moment, so watch until the end and you will no longer think of rock and sand as inanimate, lifeless objects. I promise. In this hobby, there are really 3 ways you can get sand: completely dry, artificially wet with added bacteria, or taken directly from the seafloor and filled with a diverse bacterial biome. Dry sand is great when you meet a couple criteria. The first, when you need a lot of it, and second is when you're trying to save money on shipping, because dry sand just weighs a lot less than wet sand. But in most other instances, wet sand is the way to go. You can't just put it in there and say that your tank is cycled, but all of that added beneficial bacteria will definitely help stabilize your tank more quickly. When it comes to aquarium safe sand, CaribSea absolutely dominates the market. They sell all of the above mentioned sand and in a lot of varieties. Now that we know that wet sand is best, there are really only 2 things to consider: grain size and depth of the sand bed. And choosing the right sand starts with the end goal. You have to consider what animals you want, the size of the tank, and the flow requirements for those animals. Anemones, for example, like a more medium flow. Too high and their soft tissue could get damaged, and too low, they likely will seem rather lifeless and won't have as many opportunities to grab food out of the water. If you choose a small grain size, the smallest of which we refer to as sugar fine sand, even a moderate amount of flow can whip it up and cause a sandstorm in your tank, and that sand could end up on top of your anemones, making them a little unhappy. But if you choose a grain size that's too coarse, then fish food and waste will get trapped in the sand bed, causing long-term pollution issues. On top of that, various cleanup crew members don't like coarse sand, especially things like sand-sifting gobies and starfish, seraph, and Neisseria snails. Moving on to depth, a sand bed that is too shallow won't be able to house certain animals, and on top of that, it won't provide as much space for beneficial bacteria to colonize. Whereas on the other hand, a sand bed that's too deep won't get turned over enough by the animals and could create pockets of gas that aren't healthy to your animals. Considering all of these factors, a 10-pound bag of CaribSea Arid Alive Fiji Pink is what works best for our HelloReef tank. It's the right grain size for our animals and flow, and 10-pound gives us a perfect 1.5-inch deep sand bed. When it comes to rock, there are even more things to consider, but we can break them down into 4 basic choices that you have. First is live rock from an active reef. This rock is made up of dead coral skeletons and packed with life. Since we don't want to destroy our coral reefs, we don't use this rock in the hobby. Number 2 is live rock, either human-made or quarried, that has been intentionally placed in the ocean for a specific amount of time so as to become colonized with all sorts of life. All the benefits of the actual coral reef without damaging the environment. The third option is quarried rock. This rock was once a thriving coral reef thousands, if not millions of years ago, but is now on dry land underground. It's made of calcium carbonate, the same material as live ocean rock, but is harvested from dry land. The fourth option is 100% human-made rock. Using the same ingredients as actual coral reefs, this rock can be made into any shape and colored to match the color of healthy and thriving reefs. There is a surprising amount to consider when trying to choose the right rock. Factors such as cost, amount of rock, the size of the rock, the shape of the rock, the biome, and whether or not it comes with pests, just to name a few. Let's look at sustainably harvested live rock as an example. In a much larger 120-gallon tank, while costing a lot more, using live rock is a great idea. It arrives to you wet and is covered with all sorts of ocean critters. Little worms, shrimp, copepods, urchins, and starfish. On top of that, on a microscopic level, the surface of the rock will not only be covered with beneficial bacteria, but a diversity of bacteria you can only find in the ocean. This will lead to an instantly cycled and much more stable tank that is better at fighting off nuisance algae and bacteria. With such a glowing review of live rock, it seems to be a no-brainer, right? Well, no, not actually, especially for a small tank like ours. Here's why. Number one, the size of the pieces. Unless you're getting small rubble rock pieces sent to you, you might only be able to put 1 or 2 pieces of that sustainably harvested live rock in your tank. With live rock, there's just no guarantee as to what size you're gonna get. Number two, the shape of the rock. When building an aquascape for anemones, you want a lot of nooks and crannies for those anemones to sink their foot into, and with 1 or 2 large pieces, you may or may not get that on the rock. And the third and most important reason live rock is not best for our tanks is pests. Now, I know if you're an experienced reefer, you might disagree with me, but hear me out. True beginners don't know what aquarium pests are. They don't know how to identify them and distinguish them from good things in the aquarium. On top of that, live rock introduces too many variables, details a beginner doesn't have the knowledge base to grapple with. And even more so, live rock in a 15-gallon tank is problematic because we aren't able to add certain fish and cleanup crew members who, in a larger tank, would be able to consume and contain various pests naturally. I think live rock is a much better fit for larger tanks. On the other end of the spectrum is dry rock, either human-made or quarried. Both basically function the same in a saltwater aquarium. The primary difference between the two is that while quarried rock can be cut into various shapes, human-made rock can be made from the outset into all sorts of various shapes. Both types of rock are dry, without any live beneficial bacteria, and both types of rocks come pest-free. It's much easier to design an aquascape with dry rock, and dry rock can be colored purple to mimic coralline algae from day one. The primary downside to using dry rock is the length of time it takes to develop a beneficial bacteria biome on the rock surface. But we mitigate this issue in how we set up our HelloReef tank by taking our time, doing things in a certain order, and also adding in a bottle of Dr. Tim's one and only beneficial bacteria to get things started. All this being said, why CaribSea rock? It's human-made and ecologically friendly. It's purple, meaning it looks good day one. It comes in small pieces, great for our small tanks. It's covered with spored bacteria to quicken the cycle. It's 100% pest-free. And CaribSea makes some nice shapes to help us build an aesthetically pleasing and hospitable home for our anemones and clownfish. Click here for more science behind the gear and to discover HelloReef. And until next time, be well and happy reefing, everybody.